Dan Rogers is the Chief Marketing Officer at ServiceNow. Dan's been part of our industry's highlight reel, building and leading marketing teams at companies such as Amazon Web Services and Salesforce.com. At the heart of Dan's superpower is an appreciation for the customer, the people who use the software that we market and sell. Now, Dan and I are going to dive deep into why purpose even matters in B2B marketing and how serving the customer, even as a function of brand, has led to sustainable growth and market leadership. From the historic Fox Theater in Redwood City, California, this is B2B Creatives. Dan, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for welcoming me to your home.
Thanks. Well, look, you've been in marketing leadership positions for some of the biggest brands in modern technology. I'm thinking Dell, Microsoft, Amazon Web Services, Salesforce, Symantec, and now it's ServiceNow. So I have to ask the obvious question. Seattle or Silicon Valley?
You know, sometimes I joke I was actually born in the clouds, raised in the clouds, and work in the clouds. And I have to tell you, the sunshine's, you know, you can get used to it.
It's hard to beat.
Yeah.
It's really hard to beat. And I know you're from the UK originally. And so I'm curious, tell me a little bit about where you grew up and what was your journey like, you know, coming over to the US?
Well, actually, funny enough, I grew up in the north of England, which had a lot of clouds, a very rainy place, a small fishing town called Cleethorpes. Mm-hmm. And I got the bug for technology pretty early. You know, I guess the 2x2 for my life is innovation and impact. I wanted to work somewhere that was pushing the frontiers of innovation, and I wanted to have a personal impact on that story. So I guess I was constantly seeking that, figuring out which are the most innovative companies, doing innovative things, pushing that edge, and then within that, how could I have an impact? Because that's really how I wanted to change the world in my own small ways, through technology.
That's great. And I know then you were an economics major at the University of Birmingham and a Baker Scholar at Harvard Business School. So of all the career paths that obviously would have led to, B2B marketing. What was it about B2B, or at least about marketing, that drew you?
You know, funnily enough, I started life as a strategy consultant. And while I was at business school, I did just one of these quick pop-up 5-minute quizzes on what's the right career for you, and filled in a bunch of sliders, and out popped marketing. And I was like, really? Let me do this again. And marketing came again. And I tried to understand why that was. It's not something I'd considered. I'd assumed marketing meant the kind of things that Unilever or Procter & Gamble were doing, or you do marketing for a product and you write the buzzwords and the lingo. And then I double-clicked on what business-to-business marketing actually was and realized that a lot of it's problem solving, deeply thinking about customers, creating the bridge between how the product works and what the customers want to buy, creating that bridge internally between the engineering efforts and what your salespeople conversations they want to have. And I figured out that really this is pretty central to the way a company works, and you can be right in the hub, right in the mix of all the action through B2B marketing. So from there, I didn't really look back.
Right. Well, in a world that quiz and the sliders landed somewhere else, and, you know, instead of marketing, where do you think you would have ended up?
You know, I loved, before school, I did strategy consulting. Yeah. And what I loved about that was just the variety of projects, variety of industries, variety of problems, and this idea that it hadn't been done before, that you needed to create, that you needed to invent, and that you were, every time, it was kind of day one, to quote some of the Amazon language, day one on a project. You know, think about this anew. And you know, I'd say the same in our profession in marketing. A lot of it's day one. This kind of hasn't been done before. You know, you're bridging new paths, and you know, every day I'm trying to figure out what is the best way of doing it, because that what isn't what's going to be. And so we're creators as much as anything, and builders.
And we talk about that at Gainsight. One of our values is a beginner's mind, in that we can kind of bring this first principle style thinking into marketing, which is, you know, there's a lot of freedom in that. There's a lot of opportunity to create and push the boundary. And so I agree. I think that's one of the things that draws me in as well. You mentioned Amazon. So take me back to Amazon Web Services. You were there in late 2011, running product marketing and demand gen. And this is back when Amazon Web Services was part of Amazon. My sense is that a big part of your job was evangelizing this whole cloud computing thing. And then also not just building that thought leadership, but driving growth, driving, you know, business from that. How do you balance this the tension, I guess, between demand generation and thought leadership?
Yeah, so I mean, let's just kind of pick up from the last question. One of the amazing things about Amazon is they have this day one mentality. The buildings are actually called day one. So I worked in a building called Day One North. So that when you walk through the front doors every day, you know, you have to have your kind of day one hat on. Right. I was one of the early marketers, and as you say, I was responsible for many of the marketing functions there. We'd created amazing growth through having a passionate set of developers who were using the platform because they had no other way to get their job done. And that was our core. And we needed to be community focused, and we needed to be focused on making sure that the incremental needs of every single developer on our platform was met. And so we had an amazing obsession around that community of developers and singularity of focus. And we then needed to bridge into the enterprise, into the mindset of the CEO, mindset of the CEO, mindset of all of the stakeholders that might be involved in kind of more broad decision making. So we needed to do both things. We needed to kind of keep that community mindset. Right. You know, all of the blogs, managing the community, having user groups, and all of that kind of real hands-on listening and learning, and bridge over to thinking about how this connects into the business strategy of a company. Right. And so, yeah, at once we were kind of doing both things. And I think it's probably very similar to you know, many companies that are starting up. You start with that core set of, you know, fanboys, core set of users, and you have to keep that core and think about how you bridge to.
Right. And I imagine it's the same in that there's sort of a fine line of trust, right, in the sense of serving that community, whether it's through content or community and events and all these sorts of things, but also not crossing that boundary of being too salesy or kind of, you know, pushing too much product on folks.
And the great thing is they'll let you know when you've crossed that boundary. Yeah, they'll let you know.
Totally. Well, before you became a CMO, VP of Marketing, you know, functionally, you grew up in product marketing and demand generation. I'm curious what your view of creative or brand marketing was back then, and how's that evolved sort of over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I had a couple of the parts of the triangle of B2B marketing, which, as you say, one is demand gen, let's create this pipeline. The other was really around product marketing, which is let's describe our products in the right way. And the third piece, you know, I didn't really touch until later in my career, which was how do I create a space in people's minds for us as a brand? How do I influence how they feel and think about us? And really, you know, my mastery was in those two parts. And then the third part opened up a whole new world of thinking about not just you know, what we say and how we say it, but around all of the brand touch points and the creative and design that goes along with that as well. So it's been funny because it's been coming back to a lot of things that I really enjoyed early in my career around the creativity and allowing me to express some of those things as well. Yeah,
that's awesome. And I think for us, the interesting thing is where the world we've sort of inherited, it certainly has been three different parts of the triangle. And I think they're starting to blend together in the sense that you've got a lot of product-centric companies where the product markets and sells itself. You've got growth-based organizations that are sort of like hitting the ground running, but they're starting to think about brand as sort of a function of growth. And so it's just interesting to see this dynamic kind of play out, I think, as B2B in general is evolving. There was a quote that I found that I have to recite here because I thought it was so powerful around brand advocacy. And you said that brand advocacy was a mentality around the authenticity with which you communicate to customers. We don't talk in the language of beating our chests, we talk in the language of our customers' success. And I thought that the notion of thinking about our customer as our brand or vice versa is something that's so powerful. Can you talk a little bit just about the intersection of sort of our customer outcomes, our customer success, and brand?
Yeah, and thanks for reprising that quote. I love that. I love that quote. I think it's this idea that a brand is the truth as defined by your customers, and the things that their experience of how you come to them is your reality, and therefore the ways in which they experience you. It's like, you know, what is reality? The reality is how you're perceived, and that is especially true for a brand. And they perceive you through all of the ways in which you touch them. And those things need thinking about It's when they walk through your physical lobby, it's when they come to your website, it's when they attend your webinar, it's when they come to your user conference, it's when they download something, the credentialing that they need to do so, the emails that they get, the newsletters that they get, the first interactions they have with the salesperson, the follow-up interaction they have with the salesperson, any phone calls that they receive.
Right.
Those are the truth as they read it, and that's how your brand is made. And so this idea that there's such a thing as a brand campaign, that one could suddenly put something out there in the world and it would change that perception, I think is only a small part of the way in which that's going to be built. And it's going to be built over time and through consistency. And so that idea of being authentic means you can't actually fake your brand. You need to live it every day, and that's the only way it can, register in the customer's minds.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think there's some freedom in that. I think for marketers, where authenticity is really just picking up the mirror for the company's values, the company's purpose, and being able to live that out loud vocally versus coming up with that closed room whiteboard, genius campaign that's going to bend the curve. Campaigns are important, but as a reflection of your customers' trust and that you've built, and what you stand for as a business. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Well, fast forward today, you're the CMO of ServiceNow, third highest value public SaaS company in the world, $30 billion market cap. Tell me a little bit about marketing at ServiceNow. Kind of what's the charter for the organization?
Yeah, we kind of talked about those three pillars, the three ends of the triangle. I think that's still the case. There's demand generation, there's product marketing, and this brand piece. I think those are the same at most B2B companies, and those are things we have to have mastery around. But at the center of all of it is our purpose. And that's really what drives how we show up and express ourselves across all of these. We went through a recent exercise, I'd say, dialing into our purpose. Our founder started ServiceNow with a very simple idea, and it was to help everyday people route work across the enterprise. That's deeply meaningful for us, because right from the off, we knew that this was about technology in the service of people. We arrived at our purpose. We make the world of work better for people, which defines both the domain, the world of work, that this discussion around the future of work, we're right at the heart of that discussion. We're at the heart of, to what extent is automation going to be in the workplace? How is the workplace going to change in the future? And guess what? We spend 2/3 of our life at work. So it's a very pertinent question. But we're also at the heart of this other piece, which is this belief that we make the world of work better for you. That this is in service of people. That back to the reason that I originally came over from the UK is that I had this idea that I believe technology is going to change the way people live their lives. And some companies are technology in the service of technology. They invent it and they figure out what the ramifications for people are going to be later. Be those privacy, be those things, thinking about employment and jobs and fulfillment. We don't have that belief. We believe that from the off, we're looking at the way people work and trying to improve that for them. And so that's a very grounding effort for the triangle of marketing, but also everything we do across kind of our sales and our product too. It's a bar for our product as well. Does our product help make the world of work better for people? And in marketing, that's kind of brings me full circle, because it's exactly why I joined marketing. It's exactly why I joined tech companies. So I work for a company with purpose, and I connect to that purpose, and that gives me the pep and the step that gets me going every day.
It's amazing to be so fortunate that we can work at a company where the corporate purpose aligns to our personal purpose, really. And I share this with you. At Gainsight, we recently went through the similar exercise and came up with our purpose, which is to be living proof that you can win in business by being human, while being human first. And we think that's powerful as well, because to your point, we're putting people and humanity kind of at the center of what we do and why we do it. And it feels like it's not strange that both of us, both our organizations, are really thinking a lot about purpose. I know many folks are today, at least about articulating it. And so I'm curious, what advice do you have for other founders or marketers that are hearing this and they're like, oh wow, we should probably really put words to purpose. Why is that important?
Well, first off, I want to congratulate you on your own Pulse event, which was very grounded in purpose, and it really shone through at your event, which I thought was amazing. I think without purpose, you don't really, without a defined purpose or a common understanding of your purpose is somewhat rudderless, and I think you don't get that multiplicative effect of the grounding of that. And I think it probably, is the same for any company stage, that if you're a startup, I think that is a worthy endeavor. If you're a large company, I think it's worth re-articulating and sharpening it. The cultural and societal changes that happen means it's worth kind of dialing those things over time.
Right.
And those things can be at the edges improved. They're a core that lasts for a long time, but I think there's kind of small nuances that can change over time. So I think it's a grounding effort for the whole company.
And what I love about some of you mentioned kind of the tweaking is you've taken your purpose at ServiceNow and you've actually changed your whole brand expression as a result. And I know that originally the logo, the O and the now was an on-off button, very sort of product centric. And today it's a person, which I think presumably is a customer or really kind of anchoring in around this people first kind of purpose.
Yeah, or you more generally.
Or you.
It represents you being all of you, and that you could find yourself in our logo, I think is a very important idea for us.
So how did that come about in terms of saying, hey, these are great words and we deeply believe it and we want to share it at our conference, but we want to take this a step further and actually evolve the visual identity of the company? Was this something that, marketing was sort of, obviously at the center of? How is brand and identity kind of connected to purpose?
I think, it really started with our CEO, new CEO, John Donahoe, who started just over a year ago. And he has the goal of helping us become a great enduring company. And it turns out that great enduring companies have purpose. And so I think as part of our continued evolution is really that grounding.
That's great. And you mentioned Pulse, thank you. I know you are coming off of Knowledge, which happened this past May with over 18,000 people in attendance. So community is sort of at the heart of ServiceNow, whether it's IT community, HR, kind of the customer service group. What's the why behind a community first kind of approach at ServiceNow?
Yeah, there's something very special about our annual user conference, Knowledge, and it's that 85% of the sessions are delivered by customers. Customers want to hear from customers. Customers want to help each other, and we need to help facilitate that because that's where the truth comes out, and that's how we can most help our customers. So we had that as a designing principle for our user conference, that this is for our users, this is for our customers. How can we best help them? And that if ever we find ourselves crossing that line and beating our chest and marketing and and what have you, that's not really the intention of it. There's no place for that at all. And despite having the marketing title, I'm probably the one of the guardians of not allowing it ever to feel marketing-y. And so, and I'm conscious of that, across the board, that we should be helpful. And the point at which you cross the line and it becomes marketing-y, that's just not useful. And again, that's back to my discovery of what B2B marketing really is. It's about that connection to customers, with trying to help them through their journey with some of the things that we have, from a technological perspective. But ultimately, they're trying to drive a business outcome. How can we best help them?
That's awesome. And I'm thinking you use the word the outcome that you're trying to drive, like with the conference, not make sure it's not coming off marketing-y. Conferences in general, I think, are very difficult to attribute just singular value to. We talk internally of, from a finance perspective, is this like a demand gen kind of spend for us? Is this corporate marketing? And I know we've had an interesting discussion on this where there's actually multiple kind of stakeholders of why we do these things. Talk a little bit about that, just your perspective on that.
I think that obviously many of the metrics people have these user conferences are well known, and they're externally understandable. I think the ones that are less well known are some of the internal things that happen with the conference about getting your act together. So how do you measure that? And that's from both a product perspective, from a messaging perspective. It provides a cadence for you internally to launch things, to reimagine things, to reconnect on things, to announce things. And so I think there's both of those things need to be in your overall matrix of understanding what a user conference can do for you.
Yep. And I saw this year, I think it was the keynote in day 2, there was some theatrics that came about. First of all, a 100-yard screen is what I think this was. It was amazing. LED wall taking up an incredible kind of experience for the attendees. But I'm wondering why we don't want to come across too marketing-y, but there's power in storytelling, right? And there's power in some of these sort of theatrics or in a theater to really create an engaging audience experience. Why do you think that? First of all, tell me a little bit about the opening on day 2.
Thanks for pointing that one out. We had a lot of fun in the opening. We used a lot of skits, we used a lot of theater, and we actually designed this. We wanted to draw a contrast with how the world of work hasn't really evolved. That we have new labels for things, but the fundamental process by which work travels around an organization hasn't changed all that much, certainly from the Industrial Revolution onwards, and we kind of drew that even back to caveman times. So we really wanted to make a point, I think, that it's time for a change. Yep. Isn't it time for great experiences? And that we are at the center of ushering in those great experiences at work. How do we make that, that contrast that needs to happen apparent? And we kind of, relied upon some theater to do that. I think more generally, the options available for you as a storyteller include design, include storytelling, include some of the things around performance. You don't have to be limited and boring. That's not marketing-y. That's helping to tell the story, which can still be very authentic and practical and specific and dialed into the customer and where they're at on their particular journey. I think the marketing-y bit becomes when you're painting it forward in a way that's not connected to reality. So I think those are just devices as a storyteller. I'm a student of what those devices are around storytelling, because it doesn't need to be. No one said it needs to be boring. No one said that B2B marketing for tech needs to be boring. In fact, quite the contrary. We're trying to break through the noise, and to do that, we need to be very thoughtful in how we do that.
We have to stand out and leverage some of the, I think the fact that humans, coming back to our purpose, generally like to be entertained, and they like to create some of these kind of or capture some of these experiences that they're used to in their consumer lives. There's no reason why we can't sort of activate some of that to get our story, to have our story be heard. This has been awesome. There's one question I wanted to end on. We spoke a lot about purpose today, and I know that's been such a big part of both of our company's focus over the last several months here. What's your purpose from a B2B marketing point of view? And you touched on it a little bit, but what's your purpose?
If I think back to, I guess, my origin story about why, I came to the US, sometimes I joke, had there been a digital Mayflower, I would have been on the ship. I always wanted to impact the world and had a perspective that technology was one of the most powerful forces to do so. I was very inspired by people like Bill Gates, and Bill Gates, both through the technology itself and through his philanthropic work, is having a massive impact on the world, if not one of the most significant impacts on the world that I've seen in my generation. And so technology was going to be the underpinning of that. And then I knew that I wanted to be at the heart of that, so that meant I'm going to be in this hub of innovation that we find ourselves, and working for some of the most innovative companies on the planet. Then within that, the piece that I most gravitate to is this idea that this is not technology for technology's sake. I want to see the impact on real people's lives. I want to see people who are doing work inside a company's lives get better because they can do things more efficiently. That we have created workflows that span across the enterprise to make things a lot more logical and seamless, that the simple tasks become easy and the complex tasks become orchestrated. I deeply connect to that. And it makes coming to work an entirely different experience where I'm no longer coming to work.
Right.
I'm actually fulfilling the things that I get excited about and just doing my tiny piece to impact the world.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm definitely inspired by you, Dan, and like hearing your story, and definitely think that in general this is going to be a very interesting next chapter for B2B marketers, and it's an exciting time to be in the profession overall. So thank you for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Really
All right,
enjoyed it.
Take care.